Today we're joined by Hannah from St Anne's College, Oxford, who will be talking to us about making a competitive application to university.
Well, thanks very much, Louisa, and thanks to everyone who's joined us today. So my name's Hannah. I'm the Senior Outreach Officer at St Anne's College, which is part of the University of Oxford. So I used to be a student at Oxford quite a few years ago now. I studied a course called Classical Archaeology and Ancient History, which is probably the longest course title that I could have found to study. And basically it was ancient Greece, ancient Rome, learning about the ancient world through past physical objects as well. And there are lots of courses like this on offer at Oxford as well, ranging from ones that might be a little bit more familiar to you to the ones that you might never have heard of before as well. So in this session, we're going to spend a bit of time thinking about what makes a competitive application to university. We're going to think about the Oxbridge admissions process, so that's for Oxford and for Cambridge. Because obviously I'm speaking to you today on behalf of Oxford, but a lot of what I can say is also very applicable to Cambridge as well. Hopefully you'll learn a little bit about what it's like being a student at Oxford, and we'll also be joined by some of the student ambassadors who are at St Anne's College studying a range of subjects as well, and you'll be very welcome to ask them questions a little bit later on. Hopefully by the end of the session as well, you'll have a good idea of the costs of university if you don't already, as well as how places like Oxford and Cambridge can offer further support, the different university courses that are on offer, and also think about things that you can do to prepare for a competitive application in the future. So there is a link on screen, which I've posted in the chat as well, but there's a QR code if that's easier for you. And it would be brilliant if you could complete the survey on screen. It should only take a couple of minutes just to get an idea of what it is that you know already about these things, about the Oxford admissions process, about different courses at university, supercurricular activities, and so on. So even if you're watching this, a recorded version of it later on, you're very welcome to take a snap of the QR code and complete the survey online. And for everyone who's joining a little bit later on as well, I'll repost that in the chat on screen. So if you guys have questions at any point whilst I'm speaking, you're very welcome to post these in the chat and I'll pick them up. I can see a few more people are joining us now as well, which is brilliant. And I will just post the link in the chat if you could complete the survey, just so I get an idea of what it is that you guys know about these things already. All right, so if you do have any questions whilst I'm speaking, you're very welcome to post these in the chat as we go. And I'll pick them up at a few points whilst we take a few breaks as well. So first off, you might already be familiar with the Russell Group. So this is a group of very competitive universities. Often they have higher entry requirements around A's and A stars. And they have a range of courses that they offer as well. Some of them are very traditional courses. Some are a little bit different as well. Some might have a focus on, say, sports or psychology, around business, as well as very traditional courses like history, like English, like sciences as well. So there's a huge range of courses out there available at these universities. The reason why we mention the Russell Group in particular is because these are a group of universities with high entry requirements, but also a very global reputation from around the world. So these are a group of 24 research intensive universities. So there are universities you might have heard of as well. So there's places like Oxford and Cambridge on this list. There's places like Durham, like Manchester, Leeds, and lots of London universities as well, such as UCL, King's College, LSE. So these are often the universities that are best known around the world, but it's also worth pointing out that there are lots of fantastic universities that you could potentially apply to as well. Some of these might have very similar high entry requirements, but just aren't part of this Russell Group because they make it difficult for other people to join them. They've stayed the same membership for a long time. And some of the universities I've just put up on the screen, like Bath, St Andrews, Royal Holloway, all have very similar competitive entry requirements, but just aren't part of that group. But they might still be a really good university for you to attend based on the subjects that you're interested in, based on the courses that you're interested in doing, or based on how they teach, as they all have slightly different course structures or teaching styles as well. So it is worth doing that research. You don't just have to think about applying to one university. There are lots of choices out there as well. There are about 130 different universities all across the UK, and the ones on screen are just a small proportion of those. So when it comes to making that competitive application, so what we mean is that some of these universities, particularly with high entry requirements, will be oversubscribed. So that means that you want to put in the best application that you can in order to get the most choice about where you want to go and hopefully get to the best university that you can for the course that you want to do. So the kinds of things that they might be looking for might be based around these kinds of factors. So one might be subject conditions. That could be the grades that you need in order to access that course at university. So that could be 2 A's and a B, it could be 2 A stars and an A, depending on the course and its entry requirements. There might also be very specific subject conditions as well. So for example, for some courses at university, such as medicine, you might need to be studying a minimum of chemistry and another science, often chemistry and biology. For studying engineering at university, you might need to make sure that you are taking other subjects at A level, such as maths, physics, and depending on what combination of subjects you're doing at A level, that might change which courses you can apply for in the future. A lot of those universities as well, if you are studying for level 3 BTECs, will accept level 3 BTECs as a valid qualification as well. But you'll just need to double check if they have similar entry requirements for those courses, and not all of those competitive universities might accept BTECs for their courses. So it's worthwhile doing that bit of research to make sure that you're doing the right qualifications or the right subjects in order to access the course that you might want to do in the future. They will definitely look for your genuine subject interest. So that will hopefully be really apparent when you write your application, when you talk about why you're interested in your course. But it will hopefully also be apparent in the things that you do, whether that's over the next few years or the things that you have already been doing to show your interest in your subject. They'll think about your suitability for the course. So this could come through a whole variety of things, such as supercurricular activities. It could come through the activities that you've done outside of class or inside of class in order to explore your subject and think about why you're interested in it. And in particular, they'll be interested in your academic potential. So that's your ability to do well on one of these courses at these universities in the future. So that might be your ability to manage a heavy workload. That might be your commitment to your course, how you've explored your subject. It might be how you've shown critical thinking or how you've engaged with new material outside of your course. And I'll give you some ideas towards the end of the session about ways that you could perhaps explore your course in the future as well. So these are the kinds of things that those competitive universities might be looking for. And as I said at the start, if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat and I'll pick them up as we go along. So as I said, Oxford is one of those very competitive universities. It means that it has high entry requirements and it often has a lot of competition for its places. So if you're not very familiar with Oxford, we are based about an hour outside of London, a little bit longer if you're driving from Southwark or Dulwich, but that will obviously depend on traffic. But we're about an hour away from London. We are a university city, which means that some of the buildings in the city are for the university, such as colleges and libraries, but other spaces in the city as well are normal places where people might live or work or get on with their lives as well. So there's a shopping centre, there's Tesco, there's Sainsbury's, there's KFC, there's lots of different normal shops that you would get in a city as well. It's not all historic buildings. And we're quite well connected to London as well. There are trains that run direct between Oxford and central London. There's also a coach called the Oxford Tube, which runs directly between Oxford and London as well. So there's pretty good connection for you if you are based in London already. And a few key things to point out about Oxford in particular. As I said at the start, a lot of what I can say about Oxford can also be applied to Cambridge as well. Both Oxford and Cambridge are very old universities. So Oxford is over 900 years old. Cambridge is ever so slightly newer, about 750 years old, but still they are very old universities. And for some people, that is a good reason to apply to them because they're old, they have that level of prestige to them as well. Oxford is also the #1 university in the world, and each year a list of universities is made by Times Higher Education, and it decides based on student outcomes, based on student satisfaction, and a whole range of other factors as well, which the top universities in the world are. And Oxford has been #1 for the past 5 years now, which is quite impressive. It also offers some really fantastic resources. So if you are interested in sport, there are lots of playing fields or swimming pools associated with the university, so you can practice those things, whether you do that professionally or whether you do that because you enjoy those things. But it also has access to incredible research facilities as well, from cutting edge laboratories where current research takes place in those buildings as well, to one of its many libraries. So there are about 100 libraries all spread across the city of Oxford, which are for use by its students. And one on screen, which is often seen as being like the centre of the university, because there isn't one specific place that is the University of Oxford. It is all over the city. But this building is often seen as like the main sort of university building. It's the one that all the tourists want to go to, and it's also the one that all the students like to see as well. So this is part of a complex called the Bodleian Libraries. And these are copyright libraries, which means that they have a copy of every single book ever published in the UK. So not just for research purposes, that will also include things like young adult fiction, that will include romance novels. If it's been published in the UK, it will be somewhere in this library system as well. So you've got access to some incredible resources at the university. The university is also not just old buildings as well. There are lots of newer spaces. On the bottom right is the library at St Anne's College, which is the college where I work. And that was built only about 5 years ago. So there are lots of different spaces that are being updated and made suitable for modern students as well. And there are a few features of Oxford in particular that I want to run through with you. So one of those is colleges and the other is tutorials. So these are some very specific things to Oxford and to Cambridge and to Durham to some extent as well, that are very specific to how we teach and how we structure our universities that's a little bit different to other places. So Oxford and Cambridge do the majority of their teaching through tutorials. At Cambridge, these are called supervisions, but at Oxford, we call them tutorials. And these are small group teaching environments. So that might be a couple of students, probably no more than 5, and an academic member of staff, so a tutor. It means that they have a really personalized approach to their learning. There will be really individualized feedback on the work that they've been completing. For science subjects, that might be problem sheets. For arts and humanities subjects, that might be an essay. Or a reading list that students have been working through that week. They'll then bring those completed materials to the tutorial, where the tutor will mark them or give them feedback based on the work that they've been completing. And it's a really good way of exploring ideas, exchanging ideas, and then challenging them as well. It's not necessarily a way of being really critical of the work that someone's been producing. It's about showing them where they can improve, places that they can go to next in their research or their ideas. And it just means you're getting a lot more individualized feedback for the kind of educational experience that you might get at other universities. So that's the tutorial system. Oxford also teaches through lectures, through seminars, through practicals if you're doing a science-based subject, which is what other universities do. But tutorials and supervisions at Cambridge are the main things that make us different to other universities. Another thing that can sometimes be a little bit confusing at Oxford is the use of the word colleges. So most of you might have heard the word college in relation to a sixth form college, which is quite a different structure. So at Oxford, you have 3 memberships as a student, and the same can be said for Cambridge and for Durham as well. So these are the only universities that are collegiate universities, so they have this college system. So whilst you're a member of the university, it means that no matter which college you're studying at, you're still a member of that university. You're still studying for a qualification at that university. You're also a member of your academic department or faculty as well. And most universities, you'll be a member of your university and your faculty, but at Oxford, Cambridge and Durham, you're also a member of a college. So there are about 34 undergraduate colleges at Oxford. St Anne's is one of them, and there are lots of others as well, all spread across the city. And the colleges will organise things like your accommodation, your pastoral care, they will look after you whilst you're at the university. Some of your teaching might take place in the college. So particularly if you have specialist staff in the areas that you are interested in, that might take place in your college, or you might have some of your teaching at other colleges as well. But no matter what the course or what modules you're taking as part of the course, you're still studying for an Oxford degree, and you are still getting the same kind of quality teaching that you'd get from the department and faculty as well. There are some other services that are organised centrally by the university, such as a counselling service, and between the college and the academic department or faculty, they organise the admissions process. So they decide which students to select from our applications each year and which students to make offers to as well. But we are not a sixth form college, so most colleges offer most courses, and there's no curfew for the colleges. There's no time that you have to be back for. It is very much your home away from home whilst you're at university, and it just means that you're a part of a slightly smaller community. So on the previous slide, I showed that there were about 23,000 different students studying at the University of Oxford, and the college system means that you're part of a slightly smaller community whilst you're there as well. So at St Anne's College, we have about 450 undergraduate students. So it means that you also have a much more personalised experience to your university experience as well. So as I said, those colleges will be responsible for things like your accommodation. Some colleges can organise those on site. Other colleges might need you to live off-site or in different owned accommodation, depending on how much space is available to them. I've put a picture on the screen of a very typical small first year room at St Anne's so that you have a very honest idea of what that looks like. But there are also a range of rooms available, from accessible rooms to rooms with ensuite bathrooms or spaces that are much bigger as well. The colleges will also have libraries and research facilities on site. So at St Anne's, we actually have 2 libraries, an older library and a new library. The older library is a lot more like Oxford style, what you'd expect from this, the kind of space, whereas the new library has things like soundproof rooms and breakout spaces so that you can actually talk to people whilst you're studying. So it's a little bit more like a sort of more modern sixth form centre. The colleges also provide food, so they all have dining halls, and you can often have breakfast, lunch and dinner throughout the week at those dining halls if you wish. So it's a bit like a school canteen, but much higher quality food and very reasonably priced as well. Some colleges will also offer kitchen facilities. So at St Anne's, all of our students have access to a kitchen, and it means that students can also cook for themselves rather than having to eat in the dining hall or having to eat out or get takeaway. It also means that being part of the Oxford community, you get the chance to meet lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds as well. So the students in the middle, in the black and white outfits, they have just completed a ceremony which inducts them into the university. So that means that they've just started on their courses. And other students as well in these pictures, they've been taking part in college events, whether that's like fundraising events or helping out with interviews or Christmas socials. There's lots of social events happening throughout the university and throughout the colleges throughout the year as well. So it's not just about living, eating and studying in those colleges, it's also a social space where you can get to know people, where you can experience life at the university, You can meet people from lots of different backgrounds and take part in lots of different clubs, societies, and other activities as well. A lot of people get a bit worried about having to pick a college when applying to places like Oxford and Cambridge. So you might want to think about what is important to you, because each college will be slightly different. Some will be a lot more modern, some will be a lot older, some will be very centrally located right in the centre of town, but others might be a lot closer to your department or faculty. And for some people, if you know that you've got 9 a.m. lectures, you want to be quite close to where those are going to be, whereas some people don't mind living further away. So there's lots of different things to weigh up, but ultimately it's a very personal choice. That could come down to things like its size, age, location, whether it offers accommodation for just your first year or for all years of your course, what kind of facilities it's got, whether it's got, say, an on-site gym or a coffee shop, as lots of colleges will have things like this as well. And there might also be additional bursaries and scholarships that those individual colleges offer. But if you are not sure, you can also make an open application. So rather than worrying about which college you're applying to, you can also make an open application to the university. Your application is then assigned to a college who will then do all the paperwork for your application process. You might even get an offer from a different college to the one that you applied to in the first place, but they're all still part of the University of Oxford. It just means that by doing an open application, it just means that you might get a bit more randomly assigned to a college, or to a college where they've had slightly fewer applications and then are able to consider you more fairly as well. So it's about having that balance as part of the application process. So you are not advantaged or disadvantaged to apply to a specific college or to do an open application. It just means that that choice is there for you as well. There are also over 400 different clubs, societies, and activities that you can take part in whilst you're at Oxford specifically, but also at universities across the UK. So whether you're interested in like music or drama or sport, there are loads of different societies out there. You don't have to be good at those things already. A lot of them are fantastic ways of trying out something new. And there are also lots of different societies as well that relate to particular culture or particular heritage as well. So for example, at Oxford, we have an African Caribbean Society for students who have African Caribbean heritage. And that can also be a really nice way of meeting people from perhaps the same heritage or similar backgrounds from all across the UK, and a great way of exploring culture, but also exploring different opportunities out there as well. There is an Islamic Society, and they will run things like social events throughout the year, but as well as supporting people in their community as well. There are also things like a Northerners Society. There are lots of different UK-based societies as well. And it's a great way then of just meeting people from similar interests, even if they come from a completely different background to you as well. So there's lots of different ways of doing things that don't relate to your subject or things that you just enjoy doing for fun. Hopefully you'll be able to listen to this video. So this is a video that we put together for the Oxford's Open Days just before the summer. And rather than me saying it, it's a lot better to hear from our students why they enjoy studying at Oxford and at St Anne's in particular. So I just want to play a little bit of this for you so that you get a better idea of it from them directly. If you can't hear the video for some reason, just let me know in the chat.
Like they teach each other to really help them get great system. We have been still around everything. We never learned. So I'm done his best and it's still
yeah, I got to bring these absolutely brilliant. So I will do my hashtags, I will do my comment about them, I will
All right, sorry if you couldn't hear that very well, but if you do want to watch that, hopefully you could see the captions on the video if you couldn't hear it at all. But hopefully also if you wanted to have a look at that video in your own time, it is available on our YouTube channel, and it goes into lots more detail about like the application process, about people's experience of interviews, of applying to different colleges. So do check that out if you would like. Something as well that I wanted to mention in particular is the financial support that universities like Oxford can also offer you. So hopefully you are aware of the cost of university. So universities charge tuition fees based on a flat rate. So there is a maximum tuition fee that they charge. And I think most, all the universities charge that same maximum tuition fee. So that is £9,250 per year, which is quite a lot of money. As particularly if you're thinking about a 3-4 year course, that adds up quite a lot. It's not expected that you'd have to pay for that straight off. The government has a system of loans that you can apply for, which means that the government is then paying your tuition fees to attend those universities on your behalf. There's also an additional series of support which comes through maintenance loans, which is basically there to support your accommodation costs, your living costs whilst you're at university. And the whole point of this system of loans is based on household income. So it's based on how much your direct family, so perhaps your parents, earn. And that means that if they earn more money, you'll get slightly less to support you at university. If they earn less money, then you'll get more to support with those living costs. What's really important to point out, though, is that this is not necessarily a loan in the same way as you might think of it, though. So you might think of payday loans or bank loans where you're having to pay it back and struggling to pay back based on interest rate. For a university loan, you only start paying it back once you are above a certain amount of income. So if you are earning slightly over £25,000 per year, that is when you start paying that money back. And if you're just over that threshold, then you only pay back about £7 per month. So very little amount of money, especially compared to other things such as national insurance or income tax that you might be paying out of your payslip automatically. If you ever go below that threshold, then you are not paying any money back on that loan. It does accrue interest, but you're not paying anything back if you go below that financial threshold. If you're earning more like £40,000 or something like that, then you might be paying back closer to £100, £150 a month on your loan. But it's worth pointing out that after 30 years, that money that you've taken out, it's cleared from your name, even if you haven't finished paying it off. It's cleared from you, so it's not something that you have to worry about after that 30-year period. And so many people then think of it more like a tax that you pay as part of your income rather than as a loan. It doesn't stop you from buying a house or taking out other loans or from opening a bank account or anything like that. It is just to help you with those costs of university. Another good thing about universities like Oxford and Cambridge, though, is that they have a lot of money to support their students. So they also have a bursary system, but this time it's money that you're not paying back. It's given directly to you to support with the cost of attending university. And it means that if your household income is £27,500 or less, you are being given £4,200 per year to support with the cost of your studies. And that's money you're not paying back at all. That is the university's standard bursary system, but there are other things that you might be eligible for as well. So that might be based on the subject that you're studying or your background or what country you've come from. There might be lots of different loans or scholarships available out there for you as well. It's also worth pointing out that despite all that personalised teaching, so those tutorials I was talking about, Oxford charges the same tuition fees as any other UK university. It doesn't charge more for its teaching. It also has quite short term times, and that means that if you're living in college-owned accommodation, you're only paying for the room whilst you're actually using it. So Oxford has 3 8-week terms during the year, and that means that it can be quite affordable and a little bit cheaper sometimes than other universities where you might be paying for your room for the entire year. I mentioned before about the food that you can get at those colleges, and those subsidised meals means that they can be a little bit cheaper than perhaps cooking for yourself. And there are lots of bursaries and scholarships available either from the university or from the different colleges as well. So depending on what you're eligible for, you could perhaps direct your application to a specific college based on the kinds of finance that they offer as well. Something else I wanted to mention for Oxford specifically is the kind of welfare support that it offers at the university. So there are lots of different levels of this. So one level is the Disability Advisory Service. So if you declare a disability on your application to university, then if you're made an offer, then the university will then get in contact with you to work out what kind of support that you need whilst you're at the university. And the college will also support you with that as well. And if you declare this on your application form, then it might mean that if you need any special arrangements putting in place, if you're invited for an interview, for example, then that can be put in place for you as well. There are also lots of different kinds of support at the university, particularly if you're struggling with your mental health, or if you are struggling with stress or anything like that. There's a university counselling service that you can self-refer for. There are also peer supporters and welfare reps. So these are people in college, other students who are then trained to support you with any needs that you have, whether that is just feeling a little bit homesick because it's the first time you've lived away from home, or that might be around supporting with your mental health. There are also lots of different people in different colleges. So for example, deans of welfare, personal tutors, college staff who are trained to deal with things, a college nurse. So there's lots of different kinds of support that are given to you. And it doesn't mean that you have a one-off meeting. You might meet with someone regularly throughout the term in order to make sure that you've got all the support that you need to do the best that you can and enjoy your experience at the university. And there's also additional support given for care leavers, such as extended stays at the university, so that you don't have to worry about finding accommodation outside of term time, or financial bursaries that are available to care leavers as well. So has anyone got any questions at this point? If you want to let me know in the chat, please do. Otherwise, we'll approach the application process and how you can apply to universities like Oxford and Cambridge. So I'll give you a moment if you want to post anything in the chat. And otherwise, it will be a lovely awkward pause. If you missed the survey right at the start, then I'll just post a link to that in the chat anyway. So if you haven't completed that, that would be brilliant, just so I know who we've got here and what your sort of knowledge of these things is so far already. All right, well, I haven't seen anything come through yet, but if you do have any questions, please do just let me know as we go along. So as far as applying for Oxford and Cambridge, for those of you who are in year 12 or year 13 at the moment, you're going to get very familiar with this kind of timeline. So over the course of your time in sixth form, year 12, year 13, you might be thinking about which course you want to apply for at university, which universities you want to do that at. And if you're applying for Oxford, Cambridge or Durham, you might also want to think about which college you want to direct your application to. Most schools will get you started on your UCAS application before the summer of year 12. So that means that by the time you go into year 13, you're already on your way to getting everything together that you need. And for Oxford, for Cambridge, for medicine, for dentistry and for veterinary science, you have an earlier deadline. So if you are in year 13 and hoping to go to university the year afterwards, then you need to have submitted your application by the 15th of October. If you are applying for other universities and for different courses, then please do make sure that you've applied by the slightly later deadline of the 15th of January. If you're only applying for one of Oxford or Cambridge and other universities, you've still got to meet that earlier deadline. So just make sure you're meeting that if that applies to you. For some courses at Oxford and Cambridge, you might also need to sit an admissions test. So that is not necessarily a negative thing. It's not something to test your existing knowledge. It's part of that academic potential that we were talking about right at the very start. And you can normally arrange to sit that through your school or through a registered test centre. So if that does apply to you, make sure you're aware of what that deadline is and also how you will be setting it. Admissions tests are then taken shortly after October half term. So this year that will be around the 3rd, 4th of November. And for some courses, you might also need to submit some samples of your written work. That is to get an idea about how you construct an argument and to see what your writing is like, rather than necessarily a criticism of the work that you're producing. Based on all of these things, you might then be shortlisted for an interview, and our interviews take place in December, early December, and this year they'll all be online again. You then find out the result of your application if you've had an interview in January, and then it's a case of choosing your firm and insurance choices, and then the small matters of going on to then get the exam results that you hopefully need to study at the course and the university of your choice. There are lots of different degree combinations out there. There are lots of different courses that are available at different universities. So at Oxford, there are about 250 different course combinations. Most of the undergraduate courses will have entry requirements between 3 A's and 2 A stars and an A. Often the science courses will have A star, A entry requirements, whereas some of the humanities courses might be based around 3 A's. There's also a program called Foundation Oxford, which is launching this year. So if you're currently in year 12, then you'd be able to apply for that, and that will have slightly lower entry requirements. And it's like other universities' foundation years, where you spend a year gaining the skills that you need to do well on a course. You pass your foundation year, and that means that hopefully you're then onto a degree course at Oxford if you wish, or you might be able to use it to apply to other universities if you prefer. You can see from the combination of courses on the screen that some are perhaps names that you've heard of before, like biology, biochemistry, English language, fine art, but there might also be some courses on there that you haven't heard of before, such as linguistics or archaeology and ancient history, or human sciences. So it is worth doing some research as well to think about what kind of things interest you, and particularly if it's courses that you haven't heard of before, are there any things that you haven't come across that you might be interested in? Something as well that I'd like to point out is that some universities have a lot of applications per place available. So in 2020, we have an average of 6 applicants per place. This is not to put you off if you're thinking of making that application. It's just so that you're aware that it is really competitive. Some courses, however, will have more applicants per place than others. And again, it's not to put you off, it's to encourage you to have a look at different courses, have a look at the variety of courses out there as well, because a lot of people might apply for courses like medicine or economics and management, but there are lots of other courses, perhaps with similar content out there, that might get you where you want to go as well. So it's just worth bearing in mind that some courses are really competitive anyway, and even more competitive at some universities as well. But like I said, it's not to put you off, it's just to make you aware that it is really strong competition. When it comes to applying to university as well, they'll be looking at your previous grades, so your GCSEs are equivalent, your predicted grades, which are your A levels, are equivalent. They'll be looking at a personal statement and also a teacher reference. That is the same standard for any university that you apply for, and you can apply to a maximum of 5 universities in the same application round. And the same content, so that personal statement, teacher reference, and so on, is sent to all 5 of those universities. The additional information that Oxbridge collects alongside that might be your performance in an admissions test, if that applies to you, your written work, again, if that applies to your course, how you've performed in an interview, and we also look at contextual information. So that is whether you've ever had free school meals, what your GCSE performance is like in the light of your school's performance. So if you've done really well at GCSE, but your school tends to not have done very well at GCSE, then that can count in your favour as well. We also look at whether you've ever been in care, and we also look at postcode data as well to get an idea of where you're from and what that environment is like. But when it comes to making that application, the things that you might want to think about in particular are you predicted the grades you need in order to access one of our courses? Would you like our teaching style, so that tutorial system? Do we actually offer a course that you would enjoy? And are you ready then for the academic challenge that comes with a place like Oxford? Again, not to put you off, but just things to reflect on when you're making that application. So to run through some of those key application stages before we then hear from our student ambassadors who will be joining us a little bit later on. The personal statement is up to 4,000 characters or 47 lines long, and the same personal statement is sent to every university that you apply for, but you can only apply to one of either Oxford or Cambridge. And that is partly because they have a lot of admin in their admission systems, and it would mess things up if people were trying to interview at both places at the same time. That personal statement is then your way of showing your interest in your subject. So we would recommend that 80% of it has very academic focused content, and no more than 20% of it has focus on other things. And by other things, we mean like extracurriculars, hobbies, interests, things that you might enjoy outside of your studies. And that academic focus can come through things that have academic relation outside of your studies. So that could be podcasts that you've listened to, books that you've read, anything like that can still count as a supercurricular activity that shows your interest in your subject. So when it comes to writing that personal statement, sometimes people find it a little bit challenging because there's a lot to think about, and it can be quite hard to sort of sell yourself on paper and show why you're interested in your particular course. So the things you might want to think about might be why you want to study your subject, what evidence you have for it, and also what other achievements you might have. So your why could come through lots of different things. It could come from when you were first drawn to the subject, what kind of questions you have about it, anything that particularly interests or excites you, and relate it to your current studies where possible. So if you're currently studying for your A-levels, you might be able to find links between what you're doing in school and the subject that you want to study at university. You might also want to think about what evidence you have. So this is that supercurricular content. This is you showing that you've engaged with your subject outside the classroom and gone sort of above and beyond to explore your subject. This is not a checklist. It's not about doing the most amount of things that you can. It's about the quality of your engagement with these things. So if you have read a book that relates to your course or your subject, think about what kinds of things you've gained from it. Has it helped your understanding of this subject? Was there a particular part of it that you really enjoyed, or something that was really beneficial to you, which has then helped your understanding of the subject further, or what it would be like studying it at university? You might also want to think about any relevant work experience that you've done. That kind of engagement could come through lots of different things as well, not just reading. It could come through TV, it could come through radio or podcasts, lectures, whether those are live lectures that you've been to or whether you've watched YouTube videos on different topics. It could come through summer schools, taster days, or essay competitions. Even if you didn't win them, you still had to produce something for them anyway. So there's lots of different evidence that you could be referring to. And it's up to you to just select then the things that are most relevant that show you to the best of your ability. You might also want to think about other achievements that you've got. So that could be involvement in like sport or drama or music. Although there are music courses at Oxford that aren't sport or drama courses, so it might be that the things that you've done outside of the classroom that don't directly academically relate, there might still be things within them as well that are transferable skills. So that could be your communication skills or your interest in your, or how you've shown teamwork skills or any particular issues or problems that you've had to overcome. Again, they're not so important for Oxford and Cambridge because the focus is on your academic achievements. But if there are links to your course, then do make those links as well, not just thinking about your transferable skills. Some other things to mention that are part of Oxford's application process include admissions tests. So I talked about these already. They are used for most Oxford and Cambridge courses, and they're normally taken at the end of October or early November, so straight after school half term. This year they are split slightly differently, so some of those tests take place on Wednesday the 3rd of November, some take place on Thursday the 4th, and that is just based on logistics so that there aren't too many people all having to sit an exam at the same time at the moment. At Cambridge, they sometimes require you to sit some of their admissions tests just before the interview. and then they examine it with you at interview. But you can see really clearly, if you have a look at your course online, what the requirements are for your course, what kind of admissions tests that you need to sit for them, and what kind of steps that you need to take to prepare. Some might test your subject knowledge. So the ones for any maths related courses, for any physics related courses or medicine related courses might test your subject knowledge. They might want to know in particular how you have understood your subject at A level or at GCSE. They might be testing very specific knowledge there. However, lots of those admissions tests will be testing your ability to apply your existing knowledge or your existing ideas to new material. So for example, if you were thinking of applying for history, you wouldn't necessarily be able to prepare for it by revising for the admissions test. Instead, you might spend your time exploring different sources and thinking about how you can engage with source material, as that is what is being assessed through their admissions test. You can find all the past papers and syllabuses as well, and specimen papers online. Have a look at the Oxford website or Cambridge website or the Cambridge admissions testing website, and all of those materials will be online there. So you can have a look for those in your own time and also get really familiar with what the layout of those papers is, what the timing of those papers is, and hopefully that will give you a good idea of how to prepare as well. It's really worth doing a mock paper in time conditions so that you know how quickly you have to move through each section and what it involves. If your course does require written work, and that might be the case for some arts and humanities courses, then you need to have submitted this by the 10th of November. So basically, this would be picking a couple of samples of your best writing. Don't worry about creating an essay specifically for Oxford or Cambridge. It should be no more than 2,000 words long, so it might be something that you've created for home learning or that you've done as a timed essay in class that you've done particularly well on. But it should be samples of schoolwork that have been marked by a teacher where possible, so that we can then get an idea of how your writing, its style is like, what kind of arguments you're producing, your coherency when you're writing, and also what kind of feedback you're getting from your school as well. And it can be handwritten or typed. It might vary depending on college. At Cambridge, so it is worth checking different college websites, and they will remind you during the application process as well what's required. But for Oxford, it's based on which course you've applied for. And then the final stage of that application process is interview. So interviews take place in early to mid-December. And if you have been selected for interview, then then you'll find out about this in late November, and then you'll find out the outcome in early to mid-January. You usually get more than one interview. So most courses would give you at least 2 interviews, and that's so that you then interview either for different parts of your course. So for example, if you were applying for chemistry, you might have an interview on organic chemistry, another interview on inorganic chemistry, and perhaps even a third interview on physical chemistry. But also it's that you have interviews with different pairs of tutors as well. So normally that will be 2 tutors and you, and that is then so that there is a very fair way of then assessing how you've performed. Perhaps you might have struggled a little bit in one interview, but you've done really well in the other. And it means the tutors that can then compare notes and compare ideas about you as an applicant. If they were taking place in person, you'd be invited to come and stay in Oxford for probably 2 or 3 days. And Cambridge tends to do theirs all in one day. But for last year and for this year as well, they're all taking place online. So they all take place through like a Teams call. And that is then a good way of actually making it quite fair, of also everyone being in exactly the same position of having to go through that interview process. But rather than thinking of it as like a job interview, think of it like a tutorial. So it's that kind of one-to-one academic feedback and ideas sharing that you might have in a tutorial whilst you're being taught at Oxford or Cambridge. So it's slightly different to a job interview. It's much more like an academic discussion. You might get given some information before the interview, such as a piece of reading material or a case study to look over, depending on your subject. You might also get given different material to look at during the interview itself. That could be objects to look at or describe. That could be a graph. And if they are taking place online, then they would screen share with you or show you an object to the camera or ask you to solve problems on like a mini whiteboard. So there are lots of different ways of approaching those interviews as well, depending on which subject that you are applying for. There are Oxbridge interview workshops that we run throughout the year, particularly around November time. And there are lots of example videos online as well. If this does apply to you, then do make sure that you are having a look at the ones that are organised specifically by Oxford and Cambridge or by their colleges, because other organisations exist that charge money for these resources, which we don't do. So what we're producing is accurate and it is the right information that you need for those materials and those courses. So thank you for sticking with me so far. I know that some of our student ambassadors are just about to join the session, but there are a few things that you might want to think about that you can do now. I know it can be really challenging this year, particularly if you have been through year 11, year 12, year 13. So keep going. If you're getting through your academic results at the moment, or if you're worried about your motivation, do keep going. I know it's hard work, but it will be worth it in the end. You might want to spend some time as well thinking about different programs of study and things that you can be doing outside of school. You might want to think about different ways of engaging and exploring with your subject, and in particular, practicing. If you're in year 13 and you know that you've got to sit an admissions test for the course that you're applying for, get that practice in earlier if you can, because it can be really challenging to leave it to the last minute and then do your best in it. So do whatever practice you can to make sure you're prepared for your course. There are lots of different ways that you can explore your interests as well. If you're thinking to yourself, I'm not really sure that I've actually engaged with my course outside of my studies, there are lots of different ways that you might be able to do this. So for example, one really good source of information is Oxflore. So this is a website run by the University of Oxford that's got lots of mini questions on it, lots of different debates and styles of argument, and lots of different materials and new information for you to look through as well. There are also things like very short introductions. So these are little mini books that are really useful introductions to lots of different subject areas. You might also want to stay up to date with the news, particularly if you're applying for courses like law or economics or medicine. You might want to stay up to date with what's going on in the world today that relates to your subject. There are also subject-specific magazines that maybe you've got access to through your school, but also you can get free trials of these online. And it might be worth having a look through some past issues of those to get ideas of different topics that you're interested in your different subject areas. There are lots of free materials online. So for example, there are TED Talks. You might also be able to get hold of different podcasts. There are some fantastic science podcasts like Infinite Monkey Cage, but there are also lots of things like true crime podcasts, which might relate to your different subject interests. There are materials on websites like FutureLearn as well, which have lots of mini courses on them that can help you prepare really well for university. And these are organised by universities and businesses, and they can also help you explore lots of different subjects. And I've also put up museums as well, because you don't just have to be interested in history or art to go to museums. There might be museums relating to design or science or history of medicine. There are lots of different museums out there as well, and it's worth having a look around and seeing what's out there and what might interest you. Finally as well, if next Friday, Oxford is running its final open day for the year. So if you are thinking of applying to Oxford, then we are running a programme of events throughout the day. This is the timetable for St Anne's College. So for example, we have tutors online for different subjects in hour-long slots, and you can then type questions to those tutors and hopefully get some really good answers to your questions about applying for those different subjects. And we'll also be running a live stream with some of our student ambassadors as well, where you can ask questions and they'll answer them for you. And there'll be lots of different events like this going on throughout the day from lots of different colleges and departments and faculties. So do have a look online and see what's available and what you might be interested in. You can also chat with our students at any time. We have a chat platform on our college website, and you can use the QR code to use that. And you can get in contact with students and find out a little bit more about what it's like studying at Oxford. But you'll also find out from our students in just a moment, as a few of them have joined the call as well. But before we finish up, it would be brilliant if you could use the QR code on your screen to complete the sort of post-session survey. If it's asking you for like name and details like that, and you've already done it, don't worry about putting that in all over again. It'd be great to know if this session was helpful for you in hopefully making an application to university in the future. So if you would like to use that link, that would be brilliant. And finally, if you do have any further questions beyond this session, you're very welcome to keep in contact to use the outreach email address for St Anne's College. We also have YouTube, Twitter, that you can get in contact with us in lots of different ways as well. All right, so that is the end of the me talking to you a lot part of this session. So I will stop screen sharing now.